And I think, what's really important, especially for all of you guys, not just in KL, but also in your hometowns, is, and what I've seen is how you guys are able to infuse your own understandings of your own communities' histories into, what you do and what you create. So that's why, at least to me, I found that location matters a lot. It's not like you can do what you guys do here anywhere in the world. I would actually argue that you cannot do what you guys do here anywhere else. You can't take this shop and drop it in San Francisco, where we moved here from. You can't, because this is, for lack of better, description, this is local. This is here. This is KL. So that's why the specifics of being here matter a lot. Let's see. I don't know if this will be too interesting for you guys. Maybe. I'll sort of do it quickly. So the next question I have is when? When is the time period of this boom in creative spiritual entrepreneurship? Like, what is this moment that we're living in now? And a few things that I found is that generation matters. So some of the generations, actually very well illustrated by the grandpa who's walking with his little grandchild, generation matters. So the entrepreneurs who are Gen X, Gen Y, or even millennials, even they are getting into the entrepreneurship game, are often quite different from the baby boomer generation, or even whatever we call the over 40 generation nowadays. They're the second generation of Bumiputra beneficiaries, so a lot of these entrepreneurs have had opportunities to study abroad, which is amazing, to go to university. Maybe even not just to study abroad, but just to travel abroad, to have opportunities that their parents, probably more like their grandparents, didn't have before. So it's really important that this is a young people's movement, because young people today are growing up, younger people are growing up in a world that's very different from their parents. And what they're able to do with their professional lives, what they're able to do with their creative energies, the possibilities are just so much more broad than in years past. So the era that we live in today, in Malaysia, I should say, it seems like it's a post NEP era. But I think I read this somewhere. I don't know where. I should remember. But someone described the NEP as, so it's supposed to be the new economic policy, right, where Bumiputra kind of benefits are enshrined in the Constitution. But someone joked that NEP is actually the never-ending policy, in that it was supposed to have like what's the word?
Lifespan.
Yes, a lifespan, or like, what's when the milk goes bad? Expiration date. And I think technically it did about 20 years later, between 1970 and 1990 or something like that. But the joke is that it lives on, because now that these sort of divisions have been created amongst different communities in Malaysia, you can't then say, okay, everyone go back together, or okay, no more, Bumiputra benefits, because the truth is that a lot of people still really need them. They need to, continue to utilize them. I don't know if we'll ever be in a post-NEP era, but the one thing that I have noticed is that people no longer really strongly identify with that notion of Bumiputra. So even though Bumiputra may be a way for the government to try to even out things socially and economically, in people's hearts and minds, maybe that NEP mentality has finished. And that's why there's this new space for Islam as a way, what am I trying to say? Muslim identities are now becoming more and more important, and Bumiputra identities are hopefully becoming less and less. And I think one sort of thing that we have to note in terms of like what is the era that we live in today that maybe has allowed spiritual creative entrepreneurship to give rise is this era of what I guess would term neoliberal capitalism, where sort of the Western way of structuring the economy, I guess we could call it. I don't know. Sakib.
Destructuring.
Yeah, I was going to say. Sakib probably knows this stuff better than I and has some more punchy points than I do. But basically, capitalism used to be one of several options for how to run a society or how to structure an economy. And now it's pretty much the only way. Capitalism has also resulted in the concentration of wealth in, as we all know, the 1% of very wealthy, well, I guess that would be in the US, we call it the 1%, but a very wealthy, small group of people, and there's a larger and larger group of people towards the middle and towards the bottom who just have so much less than the most wealthy. And in Malaysia, I can really see it. The rich in Malaysia are incredibly just filthy rich. I've never seen so many Lamborghinis and Ferraris. No, seriously, we don't have cars like that in California. I mean, in San Francisco, maybe in LA.
In LA.
Yeah, in LA. But is KL the new LA? I was really shocked. And not just Lamborghini, not just the Italian cars. There's a lot of crazy. I once saw a fully chrome-plated Audi what's the fancy one? A8, whatever? Yeah, outside of a mosque. No joke, in Ampang. Just completely, it was like a mirror. I wanted to take a picture of it, but I was too scared. So, at least in Malaysia, what I'm noticing is that, the wealth accumulation is incredibly imbalanced. Although there's a growing middle class, it's still this scale that's tipped over in the opposite direction, whereby the very small group of people in this country, own a lot of the wealth. And I think that imbalance has really inspired a lot of creative, spiritual entrepreneurs to, I won't say that it's we need to take back what's rightfully ours, but it's we need to define. We need to pave a new path. We need to redefine what it means to be rich. Is richness really money? What can you do with money? How far can you take money? Can you take it with you past the grave? How important is a flashy lifestyle? What does it mean, to be rich in resources? For instance, in natural resources, I think a lot of creative spiritual entrepreneurs are just fed up with kind of the conventional flashy wealth. No one ever gets rich doing, creative entrepreneurship. I mean, very, very few people will do it. So you don't go into it because you want to make a lot of money. You go into it because you love it. And so I think that sensibility of just sort of being fed up with how flashy and how showy a lot of the rich people are in Malaysia has sort of turned people to a slightly different direction. Maybe they've decided to leave that corporate job where they could have earned a ton of money working at a bank or being a lawyer or something, but they just decided, does the money really make me happy? I see all these people with all their stuff, but are they happy? I don't know. So those are just some of the things in my mind that I've noticed and that have been sort of swirling around as I see the most kind of wealthy and flashy society that I've ever had the privilege of living in here. Okay, so the big question is why? Why do creative spiritual entrepreneurs do what they do? And maybe you guys can actually tell me this once I'm done. Is this right? Or do you have anything to add? Because this is also a really big point of interest to me. So one point is, what are the aims and goals? So I would say first, most creative spiritual entrepreneurs want what most people want: happiness, security, a creative outlet, ways to provide for their family. But they are not willing to compromise their morals and their ethics, and this is the big difference. Being an entrepreneur in Malaysia is not easy. You will be asked to do all kinds of shady stuff. Bribes, transactions under the table, things that are not 100% being who you want to be, not being asked to do things that you wouldn't want to do. And the aims of many creative spiritual entrepreneurs is to be able to do what they love to do, what inspires them and makes them excited to get out of bed in the morning every day, and to feel like they're contributing something valuable to the world, while maintaining their moral uprightness. And while being the kind of people that they want to be, and the kind of people that they want their kids to see. And it's important to note that this is always a work in progress for everyone. A work in process for everyone. It's a path to follow, and it's something to strive for. It's not something that you fully achieve and you say, I'm done. So I've never spoken to a creative entrepreneur who says, oh yeah, I'm good. I'm not working on anything in particular with my spiritual path. I've achieved everything I want to achieve, and now I'm good to go. I don't think any self-respecting Muslim would actually ever say that, unless perhaps they're, God forbid, on their deathbed. It's always something to strive for, moral uprightness. So that's one important thing to note. Another important point I found is how is creative spiritual entrepreneurship different from maybe what we would call conventional entrepreneurship, or in my research what I will contrast it with is tech entrepreneurship, technopreneurship, startups, that kind of stuff. Aside from the obvious answer that the sectors are very different, there's also a distinct value system that's being embraced by creative spiritual entrepreneurs. So these values center around Islamic ethics, honesty, Islamic or otherwise, just regular honesty, doing things the right way, pursuing a livelihood rather than, for instance, a get rich quick scheme, but instead, like, this is the law. I want this to last. I want this to be my life. I don't want to just go in it, do a targeted strike, make a bunch of money, and then retire on an island somewhere. Although that might be nice for some of you. I know I wouldn't mind. Supporting the community is another value, however you define that to be. It could be, your local community or your Muslim community or the Ummah or whoever. Living with a sense of adab, living prophetically, in the example that living your life in the way that the Prophet provided his life to be an example for, and etc. So, for instance, this would not just be using Islamic finance and calling it quits and saying, oh, I'm a spiritual entrepreneur. I got a Sharia-compliant loan from the bank. It's not about that. It's much more about how you live your life and conduct your personal self and conduct your business, all mixed together. Because you can't separate who you are and how you live your life from how you conduct your business and pursue your livelihood. And you're not just feeding your family, you're living as an example to your whole community. And I think that's what I really, really, really noticed about spiritual creative entrepreneurs. So one example that I really loved was the Universoul tagline, Beyond This World. This is a photo. I think I took this from the Great event as well. But it's not just about the immediate and about getting what you need for today. It's about really preparing you and your family and your loved ones and your community for the long term, however you define that. Long term, rightness, moral uprightness, goodness, things like that. So what about the money? Conventional entrepreneurship says that the end goal is to sell your company for profit, also known as an exit, or to invite, or as another example, to invite the public to join in as shareholders in your company to go public or to make an initial public offering, basically to make money as a way to raise funds. Creative spiritual entrepreneurs know that it is not about the money. Very few people will get rich making these beautiful T-shirts or, making rhymes. Rhymes don't make dollars. So what's it about if it's not about the money? Islam says there's no problem with making money to take care of your family or to take care of your community, to keep yourself independent, to keep yourself out of debt, out of riba. But money But Islam also teaches that money is in the hand and not in the heart. This is what you all have taught me. I'm not trying to teach you, by the way. All of this stuff I've gotten from you all. So money doesn't drive what you do or define who you are. That's where the spiritual aspect comes in and the moral aspect. So you may not make as much money as a conventional entrepreneur, but that's not your goal anyways. This is what I found. Your focus is on blessings in the afterlife and making sure that you and your family's basic needs are met in the here and now, and just the basics, not to get any more than what you could possibly use in a lifetime here on earth. Because there's nothing that you can accumulate here on earth that you can take with you when you leave. Unfortunately, this isn't something that conventional entrepreneurship or even the Malaysian government's entrepreneurship programs understand very well. They don't seem to understand it at all. And one photo that I want to share is of Imam Afroz Ali, who talks a lot about this concept of money being in the hand and not in the heart, and trying to sort of detach yourself from the material aspects of what it means, to do trade, to do commerce, to be a customer, to consume. And he held two among many great talks. But the two names that I could remember was the pious trader and the conscious consumer. I think both of which are very, related to what I'm talking about today. So the lack of the government and the state's attention. They don't seem to get you guys very well, do they, the government? Why does it stay under the radar of the Malaysian government when Malaysia so desperately wants to develop a Malay share of the economy through entrepreneurship? This is something that the Malaysian government states over and over and over again, not just in the news, but in their policies, in their economic policies that my husband has been sharing with me through what his job is, which is to study sort of Malaysian economic policy. Malaysia says this all the time. We want to empower our Malay communities by giving them every opportunity to succeed. And what better way to do that than by helping them help themselves? Start your own business. Be your own businessman or businesswoman. Be an employer, not an employee. It all sounds really good. But they don't get you guys. And this is what I'm really struggling with. They don't seem to really be fully convinced that creative entrepreneurs are real entrepreneurs. They don't seem to be fully convinced that entrepreneurs who have a strong spiritual component to their work also count as entrepreneurs. And I think partially it's a money and profit thing. The government's goal is to have entrepreneurship boost the economy and bring Malaysia into the first world by 2020. This is their vision, Wawasan 2020. Hey, it's almost 2020, right? We're getting there. This is their plan. It's plain and simple. This is what they want. But if entrepreneurs don't pull a profit, they can't help Malaysia accomplish this goal. That's their idea. You have to be profitable. You have to be highly scalable. You need to be, basically brought to the next level so that you can bring Malaysia up with you. But the startup ecosystem made up of conventional entrepreneurship that the government has helped to establish only thinks in this one way. They don't see that there's another way of having value, of doing business, or of raising up your community. Because money and profit alone can't do it. If you have, let's say, a grant for 100, maybe even more, let's say like 300,000 ringgit, but you don't have any inspiration, you don't have any spirit to your business, and I don't just mean spiritualism, but spirit, something to stand for, some sort of goal, something that sets you apart from others. And for many people, that spiritual backbone to who they are and how they want to conduct business, you and your 300,000 ringgit are really not going to get that far. There's tons of, they call them grantpreneurs out there, people who just go look from grant to grant to grant. I just want to get money from the government. But it doesn't often translate into anything beyond that initial prototype or that initial draft of an idea. It never evolves or goes beyond that. And don't you think it's incredible that all of these creative spiritual entrepreneurs, many of which are represented in this room today, have actually done what they do without any amount of government funding, or if anything, it's just been very minimal. These are not grantpreneurs that we're seeing here. These are people who are doing what they're doing totally independent of this system where people are becoming more and more dependent on the government, despite the government wanting people to become more independent. So partially it's also money, but partially it's a sector thing. Creative entrepreneurship doesn't have the same, I hate to say it, sexiness to it that tech entrepreneurship has. You can't become the next Silicon Valley by making mixtapes. I don't know, maybe you can. Maybe someone can figure out a way to monetize mixtapes. But who says that you want to be the next Silicon Valley? I've never heard any creative entrepreneur say that to me. I can't wait to go global so I can go to Silicon Valley. I mean, if anything, people want to come hang out, check out California, check out, Talif Collective. Nobody wants to go to Silicon Valley and hang out at Google. But the government is not listening to what you want. I hate to say it. I don't think they hear you. And that's part of the problem. I don't have a solution for that. I'm just telling you what I'm observing. And so, my photographic example would be this guy at GREAT. This is PM Najib presiding over the GREAT gathering of rising entrepreneurs acting together, or something like that. Great. He walked through, he drank some cola kada, smiled, he signed a few things. But who here thinks that Najib actually really wants creative entrepreneurship to spearhead, Malaysia's development into 2020? I don't think that he and his cabinet members and his policymakers are really listening to what, to what you guys want. I don't think they understand the kind of value that you can generate. And that's where there's a little bit of a gap between how things could really be and what they are at this present moment. So another important topic is the concept of the local. And this is something where I think creative spiritual entrepreneurs have done a really good job in being very vocal about why the local matters. And I have to give credit to Zul for this knowledge and this inspiration. This doesn't come from me. So creative spiritual entrepreneurs in KL, I've found, don't care about becoming the next Silicon Valley, duh. That's somebody else's dream. They're inspired more by creative empires in places like Bandung, for example. That's closer to your dream. Maybe not exactly replica, you don't want to recreate Bandung here, but that's a closer example than Silicon Valley. Because the local is so very important. Local talent, local markets, local consumers, local ways of doing things, local aesthetics, local communities. That's what you want to develop. You want your wealth to start here and end here, right? Why send it out when it could come back to this community, to this city, and revitalize and regenerate and sort of keep the train moving here in KL, rather than sending it out to somewhere else. But it's not to say that creative spiritual entrepreneurs ignore the global as well. Everyone is extremely inspired by, the US, the UK, Japan, Korea, Indonesia, Egypt, Syria, Palestine. All of these places in the world are very much large in your minds. You don't just think about Malaysia, Malaysia, Malaysia. But the value chain of where things are produced and how they're sold and who gets credit as artists and makers and who does the consuming, all of that should really stay local, it seems. So you can have global influences and even be circulated overseas, go out as far as the Netherlands, go out as far as, Australia, but it should all come back to Malaysia. That's what I'm hearing from you guys. Because as of right now, with the rise in popularity of global brands over the past 20 years or so, a lot of Malaysians' hard-earned ringgit is going to global corporations that are not reinvesting in Malaysia. If anything, they're just taking resources away from Malaysia. So what better time than now to sort of reinvest in that local value system? And so, there's a lot of examples of this, but one sort of good pictorial example would be the still running. I'm not sure. Agenda Localism, are they still in business? Yeah? Maybe? I don't know. Sort of lost touch with them. But this was actually a really cool concept that they put together under, Zool and some other very hardworking people's guidance. And I think the concept of the local really strikes deep in people's hearts. And I think people get it, okay? When you create this container village and fill it with local products made by local creators, it makes sense. People really can connect with.
Where was this?
This was also at GREAT, the Gathering of Rising Entrepreneurs Acting Together at Magic. This is a great sort of physical manifestation of what local production and consumption can look like. Another concept that I'll go over, and I promise I'm almost done, but this is an important one, is the Islamic gift economy. And I have to give credit to Dr. Adi Satya from CASIS/UTM for this knowledge and inspiration. So these ideas are also not my own by any means. The main idea here is under the concept of the Islamic gift economy, and I think this is a great way of kind of bringing together like the spiritual component and also the economic component. The main idea is to follow I hope I'm pronouncing this right, mu'amalat, dealings and interactions of exchange. There are 1,001 ways in which you can even accidentally oppress someone when you're doing trade with them, when you're exchanging with them. So know the proper ways of doing things. Have transparency in your contracts. Don't engage in riba. Have ethical pricing and wages and labor processes as well. This is just sort of like the basic skeleton of what Dr. Adi, among many others, teaches. And according to him, it's your duty as a Muslim to even know just the very basics of ethical exchange and to not claim ignorance of it or say, well, everyone else is doing it this way and I'm going to follow them. And this is a commitment that a lot of creative spiritual entrepreneurs have made. It's not the easy way of doing things. To do things right, to do things fair, to follow, these, in some cases, kind of intricate rules of how to, for instance, draw up a contract. But it's what they choose to do because they know it's the right thing to do. And it's better to treat someone respectfully and humanely and compassionately than to make money off of them. So if your exchange comes at the cost of foregoing somebody's compassion, then it's not worth it. Foregoing this compassion for someone else, then it's not worth it. If you make money, but you dehumanize somebody in the process, it's not worth it. And there's also important views on money and materialism in particular. So keep your distance, don't let them rule your heart. And it's more along sort of the Sufi path of wanting to return to the basics of Islamic teachings on materialism, and keeping the afterlife in mind. These are all sort of the backbone of the concepts around the Islamic gift economy, and this is just a way that I found to describe a lot of the behaviors, a lot of the commitments that creative spiritual entrepreneurs do in everyday life. Maybe they don't have a word for it. They say, oh, it's just how I do things. It's just my personal, commitment. But it actually fits into a much larger picture. You're joining a much broader community of people who are making that commitment along with you. So you're not doing it alone, which is kind of nice. Okay, I'll skip. So then one example to give you guys props here would be the Unriba campaign is also a really good example of how to kind of teach the concepts of the Islamic gift economy and proper sort of means of exchanging with one another, but also trying to limit your, your exposure to debt and limit your exposure to riba, knowing that those who, want you to engage in riba are not your friends. I don't know how else to put it, are sort of predatory. They're often like large institutions, financial institutions. I don't think it's typically just like one bad individual person. It's usually like a corporation or an institution that is hoping that you don't know any better. So there are campaigns like Unriba to actually help educate consumers, but also tradespeople and entrepreneurs on how to try to, avoid riba and avoid engaging their customers, for instance, in, riba practices without, not doing it on purpose. I'll skip that. So the last component is, how is creative spiritual entrepreneurship done? Like, what does it look like? What are some of the tools or the processes that are used along the way? And I hope that I've touched on a couple of them sort of throughout this talk, but specifically I want to mention certain practices like ethical manufacturing, ethical sourcing of materials, engaging in fair wages, charging customers fair prices, and overall transparency. Not advertising something that you are not, or I guess not trying to take advantage of a customer just to make a quick sale, because that quick money is not worth it in the end, given your other commitments to sort of the long term, the afterlife. Other important concepts that sort of are, let's say, part of the process of how spiritual creative entrepreneurship gets done would be sort of the halal and tayyib concepts. So not just seeing Muslim customers as a market to be capitalized on, like, oh, there's so many Muslims out there, I got to get them to buy my stuff so I can get rich. So I should put a halal symbol on my stuff so they can, export it overseas and get millions and millions of customers. But seeing the whole sort of holistic process as halal. So halal isn't just what you make or what you put on your labeling, but it's also like you and how you have created what you've put inside. I mean, it's not just the bottle, it's what goes into it as well. And that's what I mean by the process. And I think in many ways, creative spiritual entrepreneurs realize that halal just doesn't really accurately describe what they're going for, because how can you make a t-shirt halal? It's not really about that stamp, it's more about the big picture process. Excuse me. And so in some cases, tayyib is a better word, especially in sort of like F&B, food and beverage, to describe, like, is this healthful? Is this good? Is this beneficial to our community? Is this beneficial to the earth, to our resources? But I think more and more creative entrepreneurs see how they can apply those concepts to even drinkable and edible things. But the obsession with halal overall in Malaysia as like a money-making scheme, I think just only proves that, how short it can fall. That it's not robust enough. It's not strong enough to carry this industry on its back. So creative spiritual entrepreneurship doesn't go for halal. It's not important. It's better to be, I don't know how to describe it, to make sure that the process from start to finish is one that you can stand behind. And another concept that's important is adab, respecting the scholarship of Islam, but also adab towards the earth and God's creations, towards other human beings, and factoring that into your work as well. Again, that could never be covered under halal, the way that halal looks right now. And then the final thing I found to be really important amongst creative spiritual entrepreneurs is work-life balance. So spending time with family, taking the time to learn, to read Quran, to pray, and to travel is just as important as making money. These may not be things that make you rich, and a lot of you, probably will actually forego making money if you decide to take a weekend and attend a course or go for a seminar or something. But in the end, it sort of pays off in terms of helping prepare you to be the kind of person, the kind of entrepreneur that you want to be. So in that sense, you have to have work-life balance. It can't just be all about making that money all the time. There has to be other ways for you to be a whole person. And yeah, I don't have a very nice ending, but that's it. That's what I found. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Okay, this is very, very